Jake Sullivan said it best: Al Qaeda is on our side.
Right.
But listen, since you raise it, I mean, not that we want to get into a big debate, but why not believe in welfare? I mean, that's where see, I find myself I'm in lockstep with the libertarians on all these foreign policy issues, and I rely, Scott Horton, for example. I've learned so much from him on foreign policy stuff. I listened to his show, I've read his books, I've listened to your interviews with him. So it's just so fascinating. Like, couldn't agree more on for it. But then on the issue like wealth, I mean, why not provide a struggling person with maybe disabilities or children and like obstacles in life, abuse, who knows? Why not provide them with some support so they can, be on their feet and have the minimum, like the basics they need to survive? That's,
Sure. I get the question completely, and like
yeah.
I share the same motive that, like, I mean, I think we probably, like, in abstract theory, I think we would probably all agree that there are people who need help, who need, like, handouts or whatever you want to call it. But there's people who, like, through no fault of their own, I mean, like, are in just terrible situations, and they're, two parents who are struggling, and one of them, gets cancer and dies, and the other one does not make enough to support the kids. And, there's all types of horrible situations like that. And to be clear, I'm a total Ron Paulian on this issue, where it's like, not all government spending is the same. And I would much, like, if the government is paying for hip surgery for grandma and then paying for bombs to blow up children, I'm much more concerned with cutting the bombs to blow up children than I am for the hip surgery. So I think the way I view it, and what I was ultimately kind of why I was compelled by the libertarian message and ultimately became a libertarian, is that, okay, so I'll say, look, the government by its very nature is an instrument of force, an instrument of aggression. And the libertarian beef is not with welfare in itself. The libertarian beef is with the way that the state gets its resources for welfare. And while I totally understand, and of course, we could probably do 5 hours of going back and forth on all of this stuff, I would just say, and I should also say that when I was on Glenn Greenwald's show, like, we got into this like a little bit, just for a few minutes. And just to be completely honest, I feel the same way with you guys that I did with him, where it's like, I really just don't want to be arguing with Glenn Greenwald when I'm on his show. I just want to be agreeing with all the stuff he's so great at. And I feel the same way with you. Like, I'm here with Aaron Maté. I just want to be talking about what an amazing journalist you are. But I would just say this. I think that left-wingers, generally speaking, have a bit of a blind spot for, like, institutions like the IRS and how unbelievably brutal they are to the American people. And, like, for all of your stories about, like, like some person who needs help from the government, I mean, there are just countless stories of people who, like, were like running their own business. The mom and dad who worked at a diner together and eventually saved up enough money to buy the diner, and they just make enough money to, like, get a salary each. And the IRS will come in and go 20 years back on you and just ruin your life, absolutely ruin your life. For what? For the crime of essentially being productive, the crime of being a productive member of society and working and trying to, like, improve your life. And if you think about it, just the existence of the IRS and the income tax is an immediate repeal of the Fourth and Fifth Amendment, of your right to privacy and your right to not incriminate yourself. All of a sudden, there's no such thing as privacy. You got to open up your books to the government every single year and not incriminate yourself. You are duty bound to incriminate yourself for the crime of being a productive member of society. And so I just think that, like, there are so many different, like, tools and institutions and organizations that could be used to, like, help the members of the community who need that help. There are churches, there are community organizations, there are all types. But when you have it done by the government, but done by this instrument of aggression, you end up getting the instrument of aggression with it, which ruins so many people's lives. And the other thing I would add is that, I'm a big believer in localism. I think these things should be done on as small a scale as possible, because you're much better at differentiating. Because, like, we would probably all agree, right? There are people who need help, but then there are also, like, able-bodied men who are, say, like, have just made a lot of the bad choices and are continuing to make a lot of the bad choices, who we don't really feel like giving a handout to. It's like, no, you actually have to change some things in your lifestyle, like, and you're much better at making those decisions the closer you are to the community. Whereas when it comes from the federal government, it's always just going to be kind of like a one-size-fits-all thing, where it's like, okay, someone being under this income level doesn't actually tell you that much about whether this is somebody who was like, like an abusive drunk dad, or like whether this is somebody who, was like a widow or something, like the example I used before. So that's all I'll say on that. Tear me apart.
Let me ask you this, and I'm going to propose a power sharing deal to you under a future administration. So let's say one day there's a genuine anti-establishment party in the U.S. and they win, and it's a coalition of progressives and libertarians. But the deal is the libertarians get all the national security posts. You guys get foreign policy, Secretary of State, the Pentagon, the National Security Council, even the presidency, because the president does set foreign policy. That's that's really where they have the most leeway. But the progressives get all the domestic portfolios, and including at the top of our agenda is Medicare for all. Would you take that deal? So you guys get foreign policy. You're basically running the world, but the progressives, we get to run the country like domestically. Would you take that deal?
Well, look, I guess with
I would.
Yes. Well, yeah, but that's not a fair deal for you, because you're not giving anything up. You already agree with us on all our foreign policy proposals. But okay, with the slight caveat of being like how progressive are the people who just got my agricultural department? You know what I mean? Like, are we talking like on what level of like if we're implementing some like great leap forward or something like that, then that might not be actually worth it. If we were going to do something like abolishing prices, or like if as long as you're not going to like a straight up, when I say socialist, I mean by the classical definition of the word, like government ownership of the means of production, because I do think that's a recipe for mass starvation. So that, but short of that, if you're talking just like kind of plumb line progressive, and the trade is
like Norway, Denmark.
Yes. If you're right. So if you're talking about which are not, now we're not even talking about democratic socialists. You're talking about in the way Bernie Sanders uses the term, which is much more like social democrats. If you're telling me the trade-off is we have universal health care like a European country now, but we're not the world empire anymore, and we're not fighting wars of choice where millions of people are being slaughtered, yes, in a heartbeat, I would take that deal. But then I will start move on primarying you guys for the agriculture department pretty quickly.